Welcome to the Spiritually Lit meeting. Each week, we're honored to host powerful speakers from around the world, sharing their stories, experiences, and hope with us. All of our speakers are recorded and shared through our Spiritually Lit YouTube channel, so the message can reach those who need it. If you're listening to this recording and you're struggling, seeking help, or simply have a question, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact us anytime at spirituallylit24@gmail.com, and we promise to get back to you. And tonight we've invited Cameron F. to share his experience on the topic responsible sponsorship versus codependent relationships for the next 45 minutes. After that, the meeting will be opened back for Q&A and sharebacks. We will give you assigned 10 minutes before your time's up, Cameron. And thank you so much for making some time and coming to share your message with us tonight. And without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Hey, welcome everybody. Wow, all of a sudden, there's 55 plus people here. It was like just a handful a moment ago. So that's great. You all come out. I'm looking forward to hear back from some of you, especially those of you who are sponsoring, because I have no monopoly on sponsorship. I've been fired many, many, many times, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I have to share today, and for or against it. Anyhow, my name's Cameron. I'm an alcoholic addict who doesn't drink or use, and I love opening up with that statement as a sponsor because I'm doing two things when I do that in the rooms. One, I'm qualifying, hey, I am in the right place. I am an alcoholic. I am an addict. But more importantly, I like to impart the solution that goes with this program. I'm an alcoholic addict who doesn't drink or use. And that's kind of a paradox when we understand our step one proposition that everything in my experience tells me I will drink and use again. That nothing secular, human, or psychological will stop me from doing that. Yet, as a member of Cocaine Anonymous, it's been 22 years since I've had any desire to drink or use. And that's the paradox of our program and the miracle of our program, that by cleaving to a power far greater than ourselves, we're able to easily control that desire. So I find in the rooms, I see a lot of codependency. And I really believe codependency is the underpinning addiction throughout all the fellowships, whether it be Cocaine Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics, Coda, Al-Anon, Sex Love Addicts Anonymous. Because you can be codependent in a larger rubric. You can be codependent on a thing like alcohol, like drugs. You can be codependent on a person or codependent on a process like sex, love, fantasy, gambling. And codependency is best described when I have an obsessive compulsive need to act out and take things outside myself in order to feel okay about myself, to define who I am. And some people, they define who they are in relation to others, usually the validation dope, the codependency dope. I drank and used because it made me feel a part of things. And it gave me that fuck it attitude. I really loved that whatever attitude I would get when I would drink or use. And some people get caught up in defining who they are based on a process, whether it be gambling, whether it be love, fantasy, whatever. So I see a lot of that manifestation in the room, although I'm assuming for most of us here, our primary addiction pattern is that of substance abuse. So how do we tease out the difference? What does that look like between responsible sponsorship and codependent relationship? So to begin with, I'm a big book sponsor. I use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's one of the things I really love about Cocaine Anonymous is that's our recommended recovery text. And I love the fact I like this book because it's written very much like an instruction manual, or sometimes we refer to it as the recipe. And when you follow the recipe, it is designed as a text, as a methodology to introduce me to this thing called a higher power. And by connecting to it, communing with it, and taking the instruction that I get and obeying that, somehow I find myself not only minimally easily able to control my desire to drink or use, but wield this power in all aspects of my life and have a pretty stellar life living the program of Cocaine Anonymous. One of the things I hear a lot in the rooms, and I'll demystify some of these things that I think are kind of myths. You often hear men with men, women with women. Now, I get that. Over the years, I've worked with more women than I think I have worked with men. And I've worked with gays and lesbians and transgenders, black, white, Christian, Muslims. I've worked with all sorts of addiction patterns. Even though I'm an alcoholic drug addict, I have worked with sex addicts, love addicts, fantasy gamblers, foodies, anorexics, bulimics, hoarders, cutters, all sorts of different addiction patterns, and have won their confidence. And for those that are open-minded and willing and honest, I actually see miracles occur. But the rule often I hear in the rooms is men with men, women with women. Now I get that because I worked with this one woman. And this is why I like Zoom, because it's safe for me. It's safe for the prospect, buffered by this medium of the computer. I remember working with this one woman. She was a crystal meth addict and was prostituting herself as a sex trade worker from the age, I think, of 17 to 52. Anyhow, we're working together and everything's going really well. And then we hit step 4, and it's an open, analysis of her defects in play. And I'm sharing how my defects come into play. And then something weird, bizarre happened. All of a sudden, I get like 90 texts in 1 hour. Where are you? Why haven't you contacted me? What are you doing right now? I seen you read my text. I went, uh-oh. So I go block. And then she got a hold of my wife. And she said to my wife, you've emasculated Cameron. You have to step aside and let me have sex with your husband so I can heal him. And my wife's going, who the bleep is this, calling me. So, I get, you get someone who's recovered and you're working with, the opposite sex, and, you're demonstrating generosity and concern and care. And this other person, they burn their life to the ground. Nobody wants to talk to them. And here you are being open and understanding. I can see how energies can get turned on. So I get that, but I have found that it really doesn't matter as long as my motives are in play, the right motive. I can usually navigate any of those problems, and I usually clarify, some of the ground rules for this dyad to work between us. And usually I think you can usually spot if someone's got other, motives at play. A lot of I do the 12 steps in 4 hours workshop. To date, we just did one in November. It took 187 people through the steps. We have, in 18 years since May of 2007, taken over 15,500 people through the steps, introduced them to how the steps work. Our battle cry in the workshop is it only takes a few hours to learn it and the rest of your life to practice it. And I really find that to be true. Now, I also, for those that I introduce and outline the program of action to, I have worked over 22 years. I average about 20 to 25 prospects a year that I take through the steps. And it's 472 to date. And I take them through a one-on-one process of looking at the instructions in the big book, of which there's about 30 pages of instructions. And over 7 to 10 days, we go look for this power together. And it's a pretty extraordinary process if they're honest, willing, and open-minded and see it through. And I've seen many miracles over the years happen as a result. Currently, and I've been at this number for a while, 49 people that I've worked with directly are dead. Now, I've lost count over the hundreds of others that I know have died that I've seen around the room. But those that I've worked with directly, the could nots and the would not see our way of living, 49 are dead. And it breaks down to 38 of them overdosed or had drug or alcohol-related problems. I bury most people to alcohol death. Alcohol is a really dangerous drug. Benzos are dangerous too. But alcohol being so readily available, it can kill you when you drink it, kill you when you detox from it. It's a nasty substance. And I bury more people to alcohol death than any other, although fentanyl does make a play for number 2. 9 people committed suicide. They were in the rooms, they were sober, but they couldn't live with it. And they really couldn't embrace our program to live without it. And they slowly went insane and ended up taking their own lives. Hanging seems to be the popular way of checking out here in North America. And you may or may not know that the suicide rates in 12 steps today is about 80 times higher than normal society. An untreated addict in their first 5 years of abstinence is 80 times more likely to take their own lives. And this is why, again, our program is so important, because it teaches me, it shows me how to connect to a power that lets me easily live without the god of alcohol or the god of cocaine or the god of marijuana. And I worship those gods from the age of 20 to the age of 46. They were important gods in my life. And now I had to give them up because they were killing me. And how do I live without them? And that's what our program is all about. How do we live without these gods in a joyous and free way? And those that can't implement our simple recipe for that power go insane. And like I said, I buried 9, and 2 were murdered. And that's kind of the MO of the untreated addict. So my key message for today is it only takes a few hours to learn how to work a 12-step program and the rest of your life to practice it. So this is my experience over a 22-year working period. Now, I do have a disclaimer. I was talking to Chris Raymer, and he goes, I have a disclaimer when I speak. I thought, well, that's a good idea. I should have a disclaimer too. My disclaimer comes from page 125 of the big book. Alcoholics or addicts are sensitive people, and it takes a long time to outgrow this serious handicap. And it's taken me 22 years of constantly working my inventories to overcome my sensitivities. But sometimes people take umbrage with what I say, and they just gotta weigh in and give me criticism. And I just go, whoa, hey, save it for your sponsor. Which seems to upset them even more. Another is, we talk of intolerance, why we're intolerant ourselves. I'm guilty of that. Oh God, am I guilty of that? We miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we're diverted by some of the ugliness of the trees. Now, another thing I hear in the rooms too, and this can be an impediment to how we effectively carry our story and how we feel we should do it. One of the things that, here in Toronto, Ontario, we had a faction of big book thumpers called muckers, and they would muck up their book. They'd circle words and highlight phrases and make notes in their book. And it's a really good process. It really kind of gets you involved with the text. But, they would get all wound up about certain things, and people would accuse them about scaring people out of the rooms, and I hear that in the rooms a lot. Oh, you can't talk that way. You can't be demonstrating the program like that. You'll scare the newcomer out of the room. So I always like to tell a story. I had a group called the Midnight Madness Group. It was a Saturday night group. And believe me, it was hard to get a venue to offer up the keys to a room for a room full of erstwhile crackheads at midnight on a Saturday night. We had to really shop around for a landlord that was willing to do that pre-COVID. But this woman shows up, and she sits down at the table, and she goes, "Look what happened to me." And she opens up her blouse, and my jaw hits the table. She has got stitches from one ear to the other and all across her chest, 75 stitches and staples. And I said, "What happened to you?" She said, "I was at the crack house last week, and this guy wanted the resin from my pipe, and I told him to piss off, and he pulled out a butcher knife, and he cut my throat from ear to ear and gutted me like a fish. And I had to go to the hospital, 75 stitches and staples. He's in jail right now for attempted murder." And then she says to me, "And I want to go back to the crack house tonight." Now, there's nothing I can say that's going to scare this person in or out of the rooms, right? So, I get it, but I just think sometimes that can be an impediment to us delivering the message we need to deliver. And I really believe, too, and the muckers were like this. They were so adamant. You had to circle every word the same way. You had to make the same note. And I think, oh, this is rubbish. I remember one guy, he's going through the book, and at one point his sponsor's working with him, and he accidentally spills coffee on a particular page. And inadvertently, too, on that page, he has this amazing spiritual experience. Well, when he would work his prospects through the steps, and when they got to that page in the big book, he'd have them sprinkle coffee on that page. I think that is absolute lunacy, right? Now, I believe that the Spirit works through all of us in a way that's unique to each and every one of us. The fellowship does not need another Cameron F. God help us. It needs you to be outrageously you. You open yourself up to that Spirit as you become recovered and generously give of your time and knowledge to those that suffer. The Spirit will work through you in a way that's unique to you. It might be soft, it might be hard, it might be whatever, but to be open to that. And I really believe that makes our fellowship diverse enough that anyone can find the right relationship, the right sponsor who they can say, hey, I'm like you, you're like me, but you don't do it anymore, and I want what you have. And we can take them on that amazing journey. Another thing I see in the rooms now, like I said, I'm a big book sponsor, but I see a lot of people kind of worshiping the fingers that point to the power. They worship their big books, they worship their sponsor, they worship AA or CA, or they worship their treatment center, or they worship the fingers that point to the power. And I remember, and big book thumpers can get like this. They just worship their big book. And don't get me wrong, I love the big book. It's a great text, but I don't worship it. So Mark Houston, who passed away in 2010, he used to tell a story. We're all climbing the mountain to God, right? We got big book mules to get us up the mountain. We got meeting maker mules to get us up the mountain. We got treatment center mules to get us up the mountain. And inevitably, some of us make to the mountaintop. Now, I've met people that are meeting makers and they made it to the mountaintop. I can't argue with them. You can't argue with someone if that's the way they got to the mountaintop. Hey, so be it. I couldn't get that way. I needed a different mule. But at the mountaintop, what do you want to do when you get to the mountaintop with God? Well, I want to go commune with God. That's the whole point of climbing the mountain, but not the big book thumper. They're still with their mule, bragging how great their mule is, and their heads are so far up their asses, they miss the experience with God. We don't worship the fingers that point to the power. Another thing I've also found, I can take 10 people through the book the way I do it, and I usually do it very similar. And at the end of that experience, if I ask those 10 people one question about the instructions, I'll get 10 different answers. That's just the way it is, right? So these are some of the things I find as things I've learned in working with so many people over the years. And I like to conclude this part with, our fellowship has many voices. We all have a voice. We all have a story. And it takes, these many voices that make a chorus for a song of recovery. Gee, that sounds kind of poetic. Anyhow, now the theme of this share, like I said, is responsible sponsorship versus codependent relationship. So the first thing I want to make a case for is sponsorship. The whole point of the program is sponsorship. And the big book makes a very strong case and reiterates that messaging. Our 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this. What message are we trying to carry? This message, the message of the big book, to alcoholics and addicts, and then practice these principles in all our affairs. Now, in sponsorship, too, it's a very demanding role, and I'm never short of someone to work with. And I've got to also remember I'm here to practice these principles in all my affairs, not just in the rooms at 12 Step. So I like to try and keep my program balanced. I take care of family first. My wife comes first, and my children. That's why I got sober, so I could be a good father and a good husband. And then I also need to work. If I'm not self-supporting, I can't take care of my family. And then in my spare time, part-time as an avocation, I carry the message to the addict that still suffers. And I find in doing it that way, I have a nice balanced program, and I've been able to sustain that momentum for 22 years. The big book, so that's page 60 of our big book. Page 89, it says practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking or using or acting out as intensive work with other alcoholics, with other addicts, right? Now, it is intensive work. And, sometimes I meet some people in the rooms, all they do is their step 1 and their step 12. The 2 steppers, you may have heard of them. They do step 1, they do step 12. I have find that's not a sustainable way to work with others. I have to be working my entire program to work with others. Working with others is not easy. In 22 years, I've been lied to, I've been robbed, I've been verbally abused, physically threatened, sexually harassed. My property's been damaged. My wife, my children have been terrorized. Like, these are intense people. And if I'm not working my program, the thanklessness of this job sometimes would drive me to just saying, screw it, right? So I got to be working my program to be able to continue running this marathon of strenuously working with other alcoholics and addicts. And of course, this is our 12th suggestion, to carry this message to other addicts. The question you got to ask yourself, are you willing to do this? Now, I know some of you are already sponsoring others. Some of you may be coming up to doing that job. Are you willing to do this? And you can help, because no one else can. Nobody understands us like we understand each other. In anthropology, we're called wounded healers. We've earned the right to carry the message to those who suffer because we've been wounded by the very illness ourselves, wounded healers. And we can secure their confidence. We understand one another. I'm like you. You're like me. You don't do it anymore. I want what you got. But remember, the people we work with are very, very ill. So, there's a passage in the book of Matthew 10:16 that I love. Behold, I send you out as sheep amongst the wolves. Be wary like a serpent, but gentle like a dove. Meaning, keep your wits about you when you're working with newcomers, but to be gentle, to be supportive, to be loving and tolerant, but keep your wits about you. You don't want to be inviting crackheads home to meet the wife and children, untreated crackheads. Nothing good is going to happen from that experience. It goes on to say, in the doctor's opinion, this seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another, no non-alcoholic could. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic or addict with another, is vital to permanent recovery. I need permanent recovery. Temporary recovery is not going to cut it for me. I don't think I can survive another relapse. So I need permanent recovery. On page 15, Bill says, I soon found out when all other measures failed, that is the human, the secular, the psychological, work with another addict would save the day. We know big book sponsorship works. Bill also mentions in the doctor's opinion, the broker, Bill W. and these early old timers, they worked hard with many alcoholics and addicts on the theory that only an alcoholic could help another alcoholic, and succeeded in only keeping sober themselves. And they suddenly realized in order to save themselves, they must carry the message to another addict. Now, here's something I hear in the rooms that really rubs my rhubarb the wrong way. By the way, I learned that line from Batman when Jack Nicholson says to Michael Keaton's, never rub another man's rhubarb. I thought, I can work with that. Sometimes I'll see someone who will say, I'm going to work with you. And I really don't care about you. I don't care if you get sober or not. I don't give a fuck about you. I'm only going to work with you because it's going to save my ass. And I think, what a jerk. What an asshole. That may be the outcome, but that's not why we work with others. And Bill and Bob understood this, and they explained this in A Vision for You. Yes, to work with others was vital to their own recovery, but that motive was secondary. The primary motive was to be of maximum service to God and our fellow human beings. That's why we work with others, to be helpful, to help those that suffer. The outcome of that is God's grace that gives me a connection to its power that lets me easily control my desire to drink, use, or act out. But that's not my primary purpose. My primary purpose is to give generously to you to help you get well. Because if I'm working with you for my own benefit, then it becomes a selfish program again. And it's not a selfish program. It's a program of giving unconditionally to others to help them get well. And in doing so, God takes care of us with its power. We have recovered him in giving the power to help others. We heal the seemingly hopeless, right? Everybody's failed the addict, the friends, the family, the employer, the religious community with their Faith Without Works program, the medical community with all their wonderful concoctions, clorazepam, diazepam, parazepam. Oh my God, pills, pills, pills. The multi-billion-dollar treatment center with their 1% success rates. Yet we, as lay addicts, armed with the facts about ourselves, we know what it's like to live in that inescapable hole. We have a solution, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous recipe for recovery, and a generosity of spirit. We heal the seemingly hopeless. That's amazing. But if you are shaky, you better work with another alcoholic or an addict instead. Notice how it doesn't say, call Cameron, go to a meeting. There's nowhere in our big book does it say call your sponsor and go to a meeting. It always says go into prayer, go into meditation, discern the answers from the great reality within. And here's my prescription for anyone who might be shaky. This is my prescription, spiritual prescription for all alcoholics and addicts who are shaky. Take 2 big books, 1 newcomer, call me in the morning. That's my prescription. Take 2 big books, 1 newcomer, call me in the morning. Okay, so that's my case for why we sponsor, and the big book reiterates that. Now, a question I get asked a lot is how, and I'm asked this a lot. The first question they'll say, "Oh, hey, Cameron, how much time do you have?" And I reply, "Why is that important?" And they go, "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you don't have a lot of time." I didn't say that. I want to know why time is so important to you. Now, I will say this. Time is really important to the newcomer because they can't seem to put it together. But if you're still counting time, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years in this program, man, you're doing time. Time is an outcome of what we do. You know, the question I always ask and it doesn't tell me much about your program. Hell, you can be 10 years sober, but you've been living in sobriety and you're insane. The question I always ask is, are you working with newcomers? And when someone says, yeah, I work with newcomers, that tells me everything about their program. The efficacy for sponsorship is there. The power of sponsorship is there. Now, it mentions in the big book in the forward to the 2nd edition of the alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. And then 25% sobered up after some relapses. There's a 75% success rate. Now, when they say they really tried, I mean, they worked all 12 steps. In fact, in the early 40s, they did the beginner meetings where they took all 12 steps in 4 one-hour sessions. Then they were invited to the regular meeting. This was before the traditions were written. And they got them sponsoring very quickly. They got them working with others very quickly. Now, I went back to university in my 50s and I was doing medical anthropology, which is the study of humans and their healing system. And 12 steps is an alternative healing system. And I came across this amazing study. It was done in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States in the year 2000. And it was a drug study with 500 injection drug users, cocaine and heroin injection drug users. And they followed their movement into the rooms of AA and NA. And they had 3 groups with a sponsor, those without a sponsor, and those that sponsored others. And at the end of 1 year, they looked at their abstinent rates. Now, they found the group with a sponsor and those without a sponsor, there was no difference in their efficacy rates, their abstinent rates, which were less than 40%, signifying you're just as likely to sober up with or without a sponsor. And I always tell the newcomer, I am not the power. I will fail you. I will not be there when you need me. When you're in a desperate moment and need help, I probably won't be there. Or I'm going to say something that's going to piss you off. But those that worked with others, 75% of them are still sober at the end of the first year, signifying once again, all the power, all the efficacy of our program is availed to us by working with others. We get to keep it by giving it away. We pay it forward. And I just found that really an amazing drug study because it reiterated and reinforces the magic of what they learned in the 1940s. Now, helping others is the foundation of stone of our recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't going to cut it. Like I say, I average between 20 and 25 people a year, over 7 to 10 days per prospect. So, and here are some things to think about. What do sponsors always talk about? As a sponsor, other sponsor, what do we talk about? We talk about our newcomers relapsing because that's what they do. The first 88 pages of our big book, it mentions 124 times work with another alcoholic. They don't mean your sponsor. They mean work with the guy or the gal that's in that hole and show them a way out of that predicament. My favorite term, you got Purdy with the spiritual cartel. You've got Camilla in North America with the spiritual gangster. So I thought I want to create one of these gangster type outfits. So I think of sponsors as spiritual pimps. That's what we are. We're spiritual pimps. We broker a relationship. This is all we do. Anything more gets codependent. Dickweed, I love the term dickweed, means a total loser. Dickweed, God, dickweed. That's all we do. We just broker this relationship and we let the magic of that connection do all the work. If we're doing anything more, being your banker, being your best friend, being your marriage counselor, man, we're in the weeds. We're into dangerous thorns and thistles territory. And lack of power. That's my dilemma. My job is to get this newcomer through the steps as quickly as possible so they can enjoy the same power and freedom that I enjoy by working with others. So, how do we win their confidence? So there's 3 ways to win the newcomer's confidence. And I love the big book because it tells us specifically how we should work with newcomers as sponsors. One is we're ex-problem drinkers and users. Now that's very compelling to meet someone who's just like you but doesn't do it anymore. Because I want to stop, but I can't stop, yet you have stopped. That really grabs my attention. 2, not only have I stopped, I've got a solution. And that's the big book. And 3, I'm armed with the facts about myself. I know what it means to be an addict. I understand it. And we can generally win the entire confidence of another addict in a few hours. But until that understanding is reached, very little will be accomplished. And you're always qualifying too. Like I've won someone's confidence, and we sit down, we start working the step. And by step 2, they're firing my ass, So you're always checking in if you've got their confidence. If they don't want to stop, and some people don't, I get it. I didn't want to stop from the age of 20 to the age of 46. I don't waste time trying to persuade them, because I don't want to spoil a later opportunity. I remember I was doing a sharing in one of the hospitals and institutions, and this guy, he says, it was a crackhead. He goes, well, I'm not smoking crack anymore. My wife's having a baby, and I'm going to stay sober for that little baby, and my life is going to be great from here on in. Now, I could have said, oh, man, you're liars already running the show. You're running a failed strategy. You're going to relapse, and your wife's going to leave you, and you're not going to see your baby, and then you're going to come crawling out back to me, and I'm going to go, I told you so. Now, that's spoiling an opportunity. In my heart, I hope that really works. I really hope you have the resolve and power to do that. That'll be great for you, great for your wife, great for your newborn baby. But if you find yourself in trouble, here's my number. Please call me. I'll be there for you. I'll work with you. I'll show you a way. And that way you leave the door open. We don't want to spoil an opportunity. And it's a bit of a catch-22 because most of us, most addicts, I know I did, we got to be pretty badly mangled by our addiction before we commence to solve our problems. And that way, crack and alcohol and marijuana and benzos and, even the acting out addictions like sex and food and all that. These are great persuaders because these false gods do not lead me to real power. They're illusionary, and they beat me into a state of reasonableness. And I'm looking for someone who's been mangled and beaten into a state of reasonableness. Because, and this is a great line from page 94 of our big book, Working with Others, the more hopeless they feel, the better they'll be more likely to follow your suggestions. So I'm looking for someone who's really hit the bottom hard and they're sore, because there's a remorse window, right? That's when you want to get them. When they come up for air, oh my God, I got to stop. That's when we want to plant the seed, because that window will close pretty soon thereafter. And then the liar takes over and say, hey, we're good to go again. Once my body and mind starts to heal, the liar says, hey, we're good to go again. Now, one thing about working with others, we favor hospitalization, especially for the alcoholic or those that are addicted to benzos. Now, opiates, when you're detoxing from opiates, you feel like you're going to die. You got to be a little careful with opiate withdrawal, because they can become dehydrated through the vomiting and, the bowels being flushed. But generally, they will make it. But alcohol and benzos is dangerous. They can die withdrawing. And alcohol, you can die from, drinking too much. So it's important that you take this jittery or befogged person and they get detoxed. Their brain has to be somewhat clear before they can accept what it is we're trying to offer, which is a spiritual, moral approach to the efficacy of our addiction, predicated that we've come to the conclusion that nothing secular, nothing human, nothing psychological is going to avail me the necessary power. So when I work with a newcomer, the first three things I ask them is, one, do you have an honest desire to stop? Yeah, I do. I got that. I don't ever want to do it again. When was the last time you used? Now, I like to have at least a minimum of 3 days sobriety, better to have 5 to 7. And with opiates, maybe a little longer as they get through the dope sickness. But the second is detox. Third, then rigorous application of the steps. Let's get you through these steps, teach you how to work them, which is not rocket science. It only takes a day to learn it, rest of your life to practice it. And then if they've decided they want what we have, this recovery recipe, and are willing to go to any lengths, and by any lengths, I mean follow the recipe, then they're ready to take certain steps. And so we ask them, do you want to quit for good? Now, the old timers used to say, what extreme would you be willing to go to? I'm not a fan of that question, because what would happen is the newcomer would say, I'm willing to do anything. And I was never a fan of that answer, because it puts the sponsor in a tremendous position of power. And that's dangerous, because I come to rely on the sponsor rather than the real power. So when I would do the workshop, I'd always ask the question, what does any extreme look like? I get all sorts of answers. And then one fellow said to me, well, based on what you're telling us, Cameron, by any extreme means to thoroughly follow the instructions in the big book. And I thought, what a brilliant answer. So that's the question I ask. Are you willing to thoroughly follow the instructions of the big book of AA? And if they say yes, I say, well, here's what can happen if you're willing to do it. And I share what my life is like with them at this point. Now, right now, I'm celebrating going into my 36th year of marriage with my wife. And that was a gift of this program, because I had destroyed my marriage. And I have a really, really nice, strong relationship with my wife. My children are 30. God, I keep forgetting their ages. This is a sign of old mentality here. My daughter is 38. My son's 41. I kept thinking my son was 42. I got a really great relationship with my children. And I was just made a grandfather last year. Got a little baby girl, granddaughter, Vera Lynn. Oh my God, what a precious thing. My liver went back to normal after 6 years in CA. I went back to university. I graduated in medical anthropology and religions in my 50s. Oh my God. And I travel all over the world. I'm busy this next year. I got to go to Phoenix in January. I'm off to Edmonton, Alberta in April, out to Florida for Orlando for the World Convention in May, and then off to Birmingham of all places. What the hell is going on in Birmingham, England right now? It's crazy over there, but I'll be over there in July, so that should be fun. Okay, so instructions for responsible sponsorship and avoiding codependent relations. It's not a matter of giving that's in question, because we're here to give. How's my time? I still got more time?
Yeah, like 7 minutes.
Oh, wow. I'm going to blast through. Okay. It's not a matter of giving that's in questions, but when and how to give. And that's the difference between success and failure. Because the minute we put our work on the service plane, and this is in page 98 of your big book, the alcoholic or the addict ceases to rely on the power and comes to rely upon human assistance instead. And that's dangerous. And like I said, I believe codependency is the underpinning problem. The codependent battle cry is, I need you to change how you think and feel about me in order for me to feel okay about myself. And I see this manifest a lot in sponsorship styles. So you get the codependent sponsors. Now, the one I always the Care Bear sponsor. I'm going to love you into recovery. I'll love you until you love yourself. The love of my own wife and children couldn't keep me sober. You think some dickweed giving me a hug in the rooms is going to keep me sober? Like, think about that. Oh, my God. And then you get the recovery bullies. It's my job to manage your life because you can't. Take the cotton out of your ears and shove it in your mouth. Call me every day. I'm going to micromanage you into recovery. Yeah. They call me every day. Like, I've worked with over 15,500 people. If every one of them called me every day, I'd be drinking bourbon right this moment. Like, come on, call me every day. Oh, you're not ready for steps. Come see me when you're 90 days sober. Hell, if I could stay sober 90 days, what the fuck do I need you for? Oh my God, right? And then remember, no major decisions for the first year of recovery. Now, every one of our steps is a major decision. I admit I'm powerless. My life is unmanageable due to alcohol and drugs. Major decision. 2, came to believe in a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Major decision. Made a decision to turn my life and will over the care of God as I understand. Major decision. Every one of our steps is a major decision. No major decisions for the first year. And then firing the addicts for missing appointments. I sometimes tease the Richmond group because if you miss your appointment, they won't work with you. You're late by 1 minute, you're out. You got to go for the next appointment. Oh my God! Some of the crazy things I hear. Or firing them because they relapse. That's what we do. I'm an addict because I relapse. I don't have any power, and I'm nuts. It always kills me with the treatment centers. They have co-ed treatment centers. You guys have co-ed treatment centers, men and women together. You got these barely toilet trained apes interacting. And one of the rules is don't sleep with the participants. And inevitably they find 2 of them going at it under the stairwell, and they fire them and they throw them out of the treatment center program. And they're bewildered. Why are you throwing us out? Because you can't follow the rules. Hell, if I could follow the rules, I wouldn't be here in the first place. Oh my God. It's so crazy out there. Then you get codependency in the sponsee. I don't make any decisions until I talk to my sponsor. They make all my decisions. They manage my relationships. They manage my money. They tell me what I can do and not do. I need someone who holds me accountable. I don't do that. I'm not here to babysit you. My job is to show you how to connect to the power. My sponsor tells me to go to meetings. My sponsor manages every aspect of my program. That's not what we do. And again, the big book's very specific. How we make the approach. So we make the approach to the newcomer. When we see them get a chip, we make the approach. Hey, have you been here before? Do you have a sponsor? Would you like to get together for a tea, talk about whether or not there's a fit? We take care of our brothers and sisters because they don't know who to work with. That they obviously know what they're talking about. Their whole deportment shouts at the prospect they're a person with a real answer. They walk the talk. I meet a lot of people, they talk the walk, but they don't necessarily walk it. Do they walk their talk? What are they like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? Does their deportment say, hey, you got something, and you think, I want what you got, right? You ever met anyone with 5-10 years sobriety, whatever they got, you don't want it? Please don't come any closer. I don't want to catch what you got. They don't have an attitude of holier than thou. They're not saints. They're not preachers, not crusaders or mission makers. I meet a lot of saints and virgins in the rooms. And I'm not here to preach. I don't think any alcoholic or addict likes to be preached to. I just simply lay out the program. Nobody wants to hear a sermon. And nothing whatever except sincere desire to be helpful. Mark Houston used to say, when you don't care, I can't. When you do care, I must. And there are no fees to pay. Big Book sponsorship is free. Recovery coaching, big money in recovery coaching today. Treatment centers, multi-billion-dollar industry. We don't mix the spiritual with material. It keeps it pure, keeps the agenda pure. No axes to grind. I'm not here to have windy arguments or frothy debates. And so I have this understanding, with the addict. I have the understanding that they're willing to show up and do the work. They will answer questions honestly with a simple yes or no, and they're open-minded. But not so open-minded that your brains fall out. Be open-minded to the program. Experience the program. You be the judge. No people to please. There's no ass kissing, no groveling, and no lectures to be endured, right? There are no contracts to be signed, rules to follow. You're perfectly free to do as you like. That's the way God treats me. I go, God, I want to do this. I want to do that. And God goes, well, let's try it your way, Cameron. We'll see how that works out. Then I end up doing inventory. So, as I conclude here, a vision for you. Thus we grow. The business of addiction is booming, folks. We could certainly use your help on the firing lines of recovery. Remember, it only takes a day to learn how it works. Rest of your lifetime to practice it. Ebby Thatcher was 60 days sober when he carried the message to Bill W. Dr. Bob was 2 weeks sober when they carried the message to Bill Dotson, AA number 3. Bill was 7 days sober when he frantically went looking for other alcoholics to work with. They all worked it quickly. So reach out to the newcomer. You're not going to fuck them up any more than they're already fucked up, right? Throw them a bone. You just might save a soul. Remember, you have your script. You have a big book. That's your script. You have your experience. The newcomer has theirs. You bring those three elements together, you're going to see some miracle happen. Our step 12 comes from the book of James 5:19-20. My brothers and sisters, if any one of you should lose the way to the truth being God or the divine, and another, which is what we do as sponsors, show that person the way back to the truth, that person not only saves a soul, but covers a multitude of sin. And believe me, I got a lot of sin to cover up. So, thus life will take on a new meaning, folks, to watch newcomers recover, to see newcomers help newcomers, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship of Big Book sponsors grow up about you, to have a host of Big Book sponsorship friends. This is an experience you must not miss. Frequent contact with newcomers and each other's is the bright spot of our lives. And I'm for that. How about you? God bless. Thanks for letting me talk about this important topic of responsible sponsorship versus codependent relationships. Back to my host.